Hi everyone, I'm Shelly from There's No Place Like Home at redheadmom8.wordpress.com. When you think of the subject language arts, what comes to mind for you? For me, I think of all the different branches that it encompasses. There's reading comprehension, writing, grammar, punctuation, spelling, vocabulary. There are so many things that are packed into that one subject. And one of the ways that a lot of us homeschoolers tend to tackle this subject is by trying to do each and every one of those branches separately. And I know that that is actually what I tried doing when I first started homeschooling. I had a separate book for my kids. One was for reading. Another book was for reading comprehension. Another book was for grammar. And then they had a spelling book. And you know, the spelling they would do every single day. And the grammar they would do every single day. And I think it was reading comprehension they would do like on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And what was the other one? The writing one they would do on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So they had all of these workbooks packed into their homeschool schedule. And none of the workbooks actually kind of cohesively went together. There was no common theme between them. It was just all, you know, just chunks of learning the English language on certain days. And not only did that get really boring for us, but it took up so much time to do that. And so today I just want to share with you something that I have learned that is so much better, just completely better when it comes to approaching language arts, because you're learning it in a more natural way. You're not learning it, you're teaching it to your kids in a more natural way. They are learning it in a more holistic way, and they're learning it in a more relaxed way. And that is through homeschooling language arts with living books. Now, first of all, I want to point out that you can use living books for so many different subject areas in homeschooling, not just language arts. And I'm actually going to be doing a few videos about them the next couple of weeks, because they are such a fabulous resource for us in our homeschool. They have literally just changed everything. Sorry, I'm sitting on a pillow and it's like getting lopsided. But anyway, so I'm going to talk to you again today about how to homeschool language arts with living books. Now, first of all, a living book is a piece of good literature. A lot of times they're classics, but not always, that were just written by someone that has a passion for what they're doing. They are written well. They have good sentence structure, good storylines. Sometimes they can be biographical. Sometimes they can be fictional. Sometimes they can even be trade books. But for me, the kind of living books that I'm going to be talking about today for doing language arts with your kids are the non-trade book types of living books. Now, I think you could certainly use trade books to homeschool language arts, but I really think that the more fictional or biographical sort of chapter books kind of make things a little bit easier in some aspects, and I'll get to those in a little bit. So first of all, obviously, reading is covered with these books, whether you are reading them aloud to your kids or whether they are reading them themselves. Reading is covered, and that's not something that you even have to think about. And a lot of times, depending on what your kids, especially depending on their age, when they get older, literature starts to become really important. And so you can use any type of living book for this. And even, now this is These Happy Golden Years by Laura Ingalls Wilder. So yeah, even that could be considered literature because it is a classic. Now, when you talk about reading comprehension, most people picture some sort of reading comprehension book. In the one that my kids used to have, they would have to just read some random passage. It wasn't really, I don't even really think that they were out of actual books. They were usually nonfiction types of passages that my kids would read a few paragraphs, and then they would have some multiple choice questions that they had to answer about the passage. And, you know, reading comprehension is something that can just be worked beautifully just into you reading aloud to your kids or having them read to themselves. And this is by having them do written or oral narrations. Now, if you're not sure what narration is, I did a video on this a while back, and I think it was actually, it might have been in my Copywork video. I'll find it though, and I'll put it in the description box for you. But I do have a video where I really get into what narration is all about and how to do it. But for now, what you just need to know that narration is simply telling back what was read. And so a lot of times it's really interesting to hear their narration because you understand what they grasped. You know what they heard. You know what they might have missed. You know what really caught their attention. So written and oral narrations, again, they are reading comprehension. You do not need those workbooks, okay? And you know, I do also have to say that the written, if they choose to do a written narration, that is a great way for them to work on their writing skills. So you've got another aspect of language arts worked into that narration, is that they are writing out their narrations. Now, when they are younger, they may be more comfortable doing them orally, and that is absolutely fine, because doing narrations orally is a precursor to them doing them written, because it's helping them to express themselves and to know how to word things that eventually they'll just know that what they're thinking in their head and what they would normally say out loud, they will just start putting that on paper instead. Which brings us to grammar and punctuation. Now, when your kids are reading living books, again, one of the aspects or traits of a living book is that they are written well. They have good sentence structure. You're not going to find run-on sentences in them. They have a wide variety of vocabulary. It's not just the same dull language used throughout everything. So the more literature that your children read, the more good literature. Literature that most people would not consider to be twaddle. So good literature, when your kids read a lot of it, they are seeing grammar and punctuation modeled for them in what they are reading. And again, if this is something that if they are reading a lot, or if they are hearing you read to them a lot, they are hearing it. They're hearing your voice inflections. They can hear, you know, the pauses when a comma comes up, and you could actually even explain that to your younger kids. But I honestly think that when your kids get old enough to read it themselves, they will see where all of the punctuation comes in. You know, they'll see that right here, Almanzo speaks, and there's a quotation mark there. They see an ellipses there. So we know that that's sort of like a pause. And these aren't things that you actually have to teach your kids with a grammar book. They're things that they're going to see as they're reading throughout all of these books, and they start to notice a pattern, you know, over and over and over again. They're seeing where all of these things go. And you can even work some grammar into that. Now, with me, when I think of grammar, I of course think about how sentences are written, that they're using proper English. And again, as I said earlier, they will see that modeled in these books. But grammar also covers the parts of speech. Now, I don't really get fully into the parts of speech until kids are in about high school, because I feel that grammar, not just grammar, I should say parts of speech, I think a lot of times are completely overrated. If your kids are going to go to college, of course they're going to need to know the parts of speech. But the fact is that it is not going to take them, say, 10 years to learn the parts of speech. It is not even going to take them 10 years to learn the more advanced parts of speech, you know, like gerunds and participial phrases and all of those sorts of things. A student who is going to college can really focus on those, I would say, in the last just year or two of high school, and they could have a firm grasp on it. It does not take 10 years to learn all of these things. But if you would choose to have your kids learn about the parts of speech while they are doing these living books, one way that you can do that is you can have them write copywork. Have them choose a passage out of the book. Maybe it's a passage that you particularly like, or maybe you could ask them to choose a passage and write it out as copywork. And again, as they're writing that out as copywork, they are seeing the spelling in there, which I didn't get to spelling actually, but they will see how words are spelled in there. They will see the punctuation, and they will just see how sentences should be written. Now, after they do this copy work, to get your kids acquainted with parts of speech, you could actually say to them, all right, today on your copy work, I would like for you to circle all of your nouns. And maybe the next day or the next week, whenever you choose to do it, you could say to them, I would like you to put a box around your verbs. And you could just do this sort of thing with them. And again, it keeps it all cohesive because it's all in something that they are already learning about. And it's not really something that is going to take an extra 45 minutes of your time to teach just one concept. It is all just kind of glued together. It all just works together beautifully. And if you're, a really fun way to teach your kids the parts of speech are Mad Libs. And I think that a lot of people forget about those. And, you could always just put on the board, that a noun is a person, place, thing, or idea. And you can put, an adjective as a word that describes a noun. And you could put all those definitions up there for your kids. But it's so much more fun for your kids to learn about those things through something like Mad Libs, where they are actually seeing them in action. You can say to them, give me a noun. And then if they give you a word that is not a noun, you could say to them, no, you know what? Fat is an adjective. That's a word that describes something. I need a person, place, or thing. And over time, they're going to start to get it like that. And so that's a great way to introduce your kids to the parts of speech, even before you would start having them circle those things in the copy work. So that's just a little fun tip there, but you don't have to do it that way. You don't have to do any of this way. But all of this is just things that I have picked up throughout my years of homeschooling. Now, I did mention we're going to get to spelling and vocabulary next. And, I did mention spelling earlier with the copy work. As they are writing it, they are seeing and they are writing how all these words are supposed to be spelled. But again, they are also... same with the punctuation and the proper sentence structure. They are seeing how words are spelled. And that I think is, that's why it's so important that you do instill reading into your kids. I was going to say a love of reading, but I have to be realistic, and I know that not everybody loves reading. Not everybody loves playing the piano. Not everybody loves sports. So I don't want to start thinking that everybody is just going to love reading just if you approach it just the perfect way, because that's just not reasonable. It doesn't happen that way. But I do really think that it's still important that you work as much reading into your child's homeschooling as possible, because it is such a great way. They will pick things up so much better when they are modeled than when they are just asked to do, exercises that don't really have any other meaning other than to just say, find the prepositional phrase in this sentence. They're actually seeing it how an actual author uses these things. So again, back to spelling. They are seeing all of these words being spelled over and over and over again. Now, that might actually be enough for a natural speller. There are kids out there who are just naturally good at spelling. They just never have to look things up. They never have to ask someone how to spell something. Even when I was in school, I never had to study for spelling tests. I was just one of those kids who was a natural speller. But just like not everybody likes reading, not everybody is really good at spelling, especially naturally. Some kids need to take a little bit more work in order to get that far. So some ideas for teaching spelling through your living books is, if it is an older child who is reading a book independently, you could ask them to keep a list of words that they come across that they want to remember how to spell. Maybe it's something that when they look at it, they know that they definitely wouldn't know how to spell that if they were ever asked. It is also a great way for them to work vocabulary in there. Ask them to write down any words they're not sure what they mean, because then later on they can go back and they can find out what it means, whether by looking it up, maybe just even asking you if you prefer to do it that way. A lot of times I will tell my kids when they are looking words up, because what I found is my kids prefer to use the dictionary on the phone, because we're in the 21st century. We do have dictionaries in the house, but when my kids look things up, they look for them on the dictionary or on the phone. What I found, though, is that a lot of the dictionary definitions, they're not very clear anymore. I've noticed that. So what I've been telling my kids to do, rather than having them actually look up the definition on the phone, is to have them look up synonyms. I tell them, Look for a synonym for that word, and I want you to find a synonym that you understand and write that down. And there you go, there's another way. There's a way for you to teach your kids synonyms and antonyms, is by doing that. And now, if you don't want to do, that additional written work, with having your kids write the vocabulary list of words that they don't really know what they mean, you could also just work that into their oral or written narration, because as they are reading the book, they will see these words in context. And so when they are narrating it, it will become pretty clear if they use a word that they're not really sure what it means. So that is another way for them to actually tackle vocabulary with these living books, is just by reading them in context. And a lot of times the books or the words will probably be used throughout the book. So that is another way. Vocabulary, you do not need a separate curriculum for that either. Oh, and also, other than them having a list, if you prefer, you could also come up with your own spelling words for your kids. Now, some kids like spelling words. And so you could actually go through the book and say, if you know that they're going to be reading chapter 1, then go through chapter 1 and write a list of spelling words for your kids of words that you think they might need a little bit of help with. So you could also come up with that on your own. It just really depends on how you prefer to approach these things. But again, they are all things that are going to help them to just learn to approach things in a more holistic manner. And now writing. Writing, I've already kind of touched on. I've explained how they will learn how things are written properly, what good grammar looks like, what sentences look like, how there are different forms of sentences. Some are long, some are short, some start with prepositional phrases, some are simple sentences. They don't have to learn all of these things by name right away. What they can learn is just by seeing it written. And the way that you can experience how well they have taken all this in is by having them notebook through the books, whether it's read alouds or whether it's their independent silent reading. You could ask them to just notebook through it, whether it would be notebooking their written narrations, whether it would be notebooking a character analysis, whether you would ask them to notebook maybe an alternate ending to a chapter. It could be anything like that. And you could actually even mix it up and have them do a variety of those things so that they can learn to write in different ways, because they are seeing it in the book, different types of writing, different types of sentences, and they can actually do it themselves in those notebooks. And this is actually where trade books might actually come in helpful too, because trade books are nonfiction books. So a lot of times they are written in a different format than literature is written. So that is where trade books might actually be helpful to have your kids read those once in a while too. They will see that there is a difference between fictional writing and a nonfiction book that is written more for information rather than to tell a story. Now, before I finish up, because I've tackled all of the aspects of language arts and how you can do them just with a living book, I do want to point out, you don't have to use just a chapter book. If your kids are younger, don't feel that this is something that you have to wait for and that you have to use all those books ahead of time. Picture books are another great material to use for this same type of learning. Everything that I have talked about with the chapter book, you can do with a picture book. The only thing that I would recommend is to find a book, a picture book, that has plenty of writing in it. There are a lot of books nowadays that have maybe 2 or 3 lines on each page. And while that is certainly good to, to read to like a 4 or 5-year-old, if you are wanting to teach your kids language arts with the book, I would suggest finding some that they can handle, but that have more writing in them, that give them more opportunity to see how things are written, how words are spelled, everything that we talked about in the chapter book. So these Dallaire books are fantastic. They are great picture books that you could use. There are so many great picture books that you could use. But I would just recommend looking for some that have a little bit more text on them, because it will make things a little bit easier for you if they have more words and more sentences and more paragraphs to look at. So anyway, that is all that I have for you today. Like I said, I'm going to continue on. I'm going to do another video on how to homeschool history with living books, and then I'm also going to do one on how to homeschool science with living books, and they will come up over in the next couple of weeks. I'm not going to guarantee when they're going to come out, because it always seems that when I say specifically when I'm going to do something, that something happens and I don't get to do it that day. So I'm just going to say that I am planning on doing that within the next couple of weeks. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can just leave them down below. I will get back to you as soon as possible. And if you like my work, I encourage you to just check out my page on Patreon and see what I have to offer you there. And I hope you have a great day.